All right, let's start off with a question. What's one dish that's made with red or white sauce, has slender noodles, and tastes even more amazing with a side of breadsticks or garlic bread? That's right, spaghetti. But not just any spaghetti. Today I'm going to teach you how to make my family's famous homemade spaghetti. Anyone who's ever tried our recipe has begged for it to be on the menu at every family gathering or party. It's a recipe that has stayed within my family and passed down from generation to generation. My grandmother made it while I was growing up, and it's something that my mom makes to celebrate everything from birthdays to Christmas, Thanksgiving to Father's Day. It never gets old. And my promise to you is that by the end of this video, you won't have to think twice about what you should bring to your family's gathering or to a work potluck or what to make just to impress a date. So if you're ready to add a new Scandinavian-inspired recipe to your arsenal, let's get started. All right, so the ingredients you'll need for this recipe is 3 15-ounce cans of tomato sauce, a 6-ounce can of tomato paste, salt, pepper, and Johnny Doc's seasoning salt. You'll need sugar, 1 medium onion, and then you'll need ground nutmeg, ground allspice, oregano, ground cloves, see that there, garlic powder, cinnamon, an olive oil of your choice here. I like to use the light extra virgin olive oil. About 2 pounds of ground beef. And then to add an extra little touch, you can get some garlic bread of your choice, as well as topping the spaghetti at the end with some Parmesan cheese. And of course, last but not least, a box of spaghetti noodles. So first, we want to saute an onion. So I've already started preparing some of the onion, but I just want to show you how thinly to slice these. Because we want to make sure that they evenly cook while we're sauteing them. So we'll get this going here. I'm not really worried about these being too nicely cut because I'm actually going to run mine through an onion chopper, which I have right here. And so I'd recommend getting one of these, but it's totally not necessary to have one. It just kind of saves you a little bit of time and it just gets the job done a little quicker and easier. So then how this onion chopper works here, obviously you can keep cutting through and making sure everything's nice and you kind of just go at it. But if you have one of these, you can just, so for those of you who can't see it, there you go. So you just press down and it chops it up. You see that? Look at that. And once you're done chopping up your onions, you're going to want to take the olive oil and place just a little bit in the bottom of the pan here. Just kind of swivel it around in there. Not too much, maybe a tablespoon at the most. That looks good. And then you're going to want to put it on medium heat. So on mine it goes from 0 to 10. So you want it around a 6 or 5. And then you're going to just place the onions in there. And then you'll have the onions start to sizzle here in a little bit. You kind of just want to stir them around and place a little bit of the Johnny seasoning in here. Just a little sprinkle, not really a exact measurement to it. It's kind of just by look, but just you kind of want a little light dusting on there. And then again, the same with the salt. Just a little bit, since we have salt that we're going to go in with the meat later. And then give it a little punch with the pepper. Looks good to me. And so you're going to want to stir that around as it sizzles. And once the onions become translucent and a little kind of golden brown, then that's when we'll put it and move it into the next step. All right, well now, while the onions are cooking there, let's start on making the sauce. So you're gonna start with the tomato paste. You're gonna take like a spatula, because it is a little thicker, and you're gonna wanna put it into a bigger pot here. And if you're gonna use a big pot, you're gonna wanna use the biggest one for the sauce pot. So that's what we're doing here. Place that in there. Let me just get this last little bit out. Perfect. Let's get that going. There. Perfect. And so since the tomato paste is so thick, you're going to add about 6 ounces of water. Now you don't want to add too much too quickly, because it's really hard to take the moisture out rather than put it in if you feel like you need more. So we got that, and then if you can see in there, you kind of just stir it around and kind of break it up. Break it up, see how it's turning into sauce there? Kind of can see, yeah, see? And so the reason why you do the tomato paste before the tomato sauce is because when you put the tomato sauce in there, the tomato paste can tend to stick together and be like a large clump, and this makes it so you can kind of break it up before then without having to deal with that issue happening. So perfect, so that looks good to me. Look good to y'all? Yeah, all right. So we got that, and then you're gonna add your 3 cans of tomato sauce in there. So there goes 1. There goes 1. 2. 3. Perfect, so that's going. And I'll just get the heat going on this one. So on the sauce here, you're gonna want a simmer heat. So maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, you're gonna want around a 3. So we'll stir that in, get that going. And now, let's add our spices to the sauce. All right, so the sauce, we're gonna add some Johnny seasoning. Again, it's kind of just a little spritz. Get that going in there. And then you're gonna want to add 2 tablespoons of sugar. So we got this here. There's 1 and 2. And then we'll just stir that around here. This guy. There we go. So we got our stir. Perfect. We'll let that simmer. All right, and so when the onions start to brown, this is what they'll look like here. Kind of hash browny to where they're got a little brown tint to them, if you can see that. And then we're gonna wanna put that in the sauce here. So we'll bring that over. Perfect. Now don't get rid of this pan just yet, because we're actually gonna cook the ground beef in this same pan. So let's get this going. Perfect, looks good. You don't have to really get all of it either, because it's gonna combine later. So move that to the back again. All right, perfect. And again, let that simmer, and let's get started on the meat. All right, so in regards to the meat, today we're gonna be using 90% Angus, 90% lean. And again, like I said, so about 2 pounds. So you're kind of just gonna open that, and then just have it go right into the pan here. And we just wanna kind of break this up here. Yeah, it looks like it should be just right. Awesome. And while that's turning brown on one side, let's get some spices on it. All right, pro tip number 1. So while we have the meat simmering at about 60% heat, we want to start getting the seasoning on there. But since we want the seasoning to be evenly distributed amongst the meat, all of the measurements we're about to do for the spices, we're going to put in this little bowl here. So find one of these, and we're just going to put everything in here. You're just going to need, everything's going to be a half teaspoon or 1 teaspoon. So I'm just going to use a half teaspoon here. So we have 1/2 teaspoon of ground cloves. We're going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of ground garlic powder. So we've got this. Perfect. It's already starting to smell amazing in here. So we'll put that in there. And then 1 teaspoon of allspice. So we're going to do 2 of these since this is half a teaspoon. So there's 1. And then again, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. So there's number 1. And then the same with the nutmeg. We're going to do 1 teaspoon of that. There's 1. Oregano. 1 teaspoon of oregano. That's actually like a little bit over, so there's 1. And we're going to want to stir all of them together in here. Make it pretty even and fine. Look at that. Comes together pretty nicely. All right. And then so then we're going to put on the seasoning at 2 different points within the meat cooking process. So this is almost brown on one side, so I'll just put a little bit of it on top here. Kind of just guesstimate like half or so. Looks good. And then I'll give it a quick stir. Awesome. And then now that we have some of the seasoning in there, we're gonna let it cook for a few more minutes, and then we'll add another application of the seasoning. So once the meat is almost or predominantly brown here, as you can see, it's almost fully cooked, we're gonna wanna apply the rest of the seasoning we have on there. So just like we did before, kind of evenly distributed amongst the meats. Again, we're gonna wanna stir that in. And then once the meat is brown, we'll move on to the next step. So once the meat is fully cooked, fully brown, as you can see, no more red, we're gonna do 1 last little spritz of Johnny's Docks seasoning there. Again, just a little bit to give it a little pizzazz. And just stir that in. Just a quick stir, because everything's gonna get stirred again together once we get it in the sauce, and that's what we're gonna do right now. So we'll move on to the next step of moving into the sauce, and this requires pro tip number 2. So while cooking the meat, a lot of the grease can build up at the bottom of the meat, and so instead of putting that in the sauce, we wouldn't necessarily want that grease in there. So you can do one of 2 things. You can either dump this out into the sink and get rid of some of that grease and then put it into the sauce, or you can use one of these slotted spoons here, which will kind of strain some of the grease out as we put it in here. And then you're just gonna wanna combine the meat into the sauce. So once we have all the meat in there, as you might guess, we just stir it in. And then once that's done, the sauce can just sit here and simmer for the rest of the day or whenever you're gonna eat it. And in the meantime, we'll get started on the noodles. So while we have the sauce simmer in there, we're gonna move on to our last and final step, which is getting our spaghetti noodles cooked. Now this is also my last pro tip, and that is we're only making these noodles for the sake of this video. We would like to have the sauce simmer for as long as we can prior to making the noodles, because that way the flavors will be able to blend together through time. So before we get started, let's get our sauce covered here. And again, that's about 30% heat. And we have 4 to 6 quarts of water that are getting ready to boil. And once that starts to boil, we'll get started on the noodles. All right, now that the water is boiling, we're gonna add a little bit of olive oil to the water. And this will make it so that the noodles don't stick to each other. So we don't have little clumps of noodles once it's all said and done. So we'll add a little bit to there. And then we'll add a little bit of salt to taste. This will give the noodles a little extra flavor to them. So we'll add a little in there. And then we'll add the noodles. And now that those are all boiling up, you want to set a timer for about, you'll want to set a timer for about 9 to 12 minutes, depending on if you like them al dente. So it has to do with the texture of the noodle. We like them a little softer around here, so 12 minutes will be our goal. So we'll get that going. All All right, now that's looking good. It's been 12 minutes. Consistency's looking good and the tenderness is looking right on the noodles. Now all that's left is to strain the noodles and dish it up. All right, well, here you have it. Here is our final product of spaghetti. So if you can see that, the lighting's good. As you can tell, we've topped it with some Parmesan cheese here, aged 10 months. Got to get that cheesy flavor. And also it's accompanied by some garlic bread. And as stated earlier, the longer you simmer the sauce, the better that this is gonna taste. Of course, we made the noodles very quick to get everything kind of so we could show you how it's done. But ideally, you wanna cook the sauce the day before you're serving it, and then cook the noodles right before you're serving it, like the day afterwards. So the next time you are invited to an event where bringing food is encouraged, I hope you make this recipe because it's guaranteed to impress anyone who tastes it. Thank you.